Good morning. Welcome to Books at the Bottom of the Stairs. My name's Lorene, and this is Cleobel. Hi, say hi. Oh no, she's got business. Anyhow, welcome. I have Jane Steele that I promised I would speak to you about at the end of the last video. And one of the reasons I'm late today is that I have been reading the ending of 13 Secrets. Michelle Harrison is the author, and this is the third in a trilogy about Rowan, who has gone to rescue her brother in fairyland. He's been exchanged for a changeling, and over the course of the 3 books, she's become embroiled in different kinds of adventures and conflicts with the fairy world, and so now this is the culmination of all those different bits and pieces coming together, and everybody is currently getting together in Highgate Manor for the finale. So yeah, it's been pretty exciting. But Jane Steele has been quite an interesting book to me because it's not really a retelling of Jane Eyre. It's sort of a parallel verse of Jane Eyre. Both of the books take place in the same time frame and in the same societal norms and expectations that we see in Jane Eyre, but the difference between Jane Eyre is that she's a bit more of a passive, recipient of what's available to her as a young woman, and whereas Jane Steele is much more active in her in the conflicts that she encounters. And we meet Jane Steele when she's a young girl. She's around 8 years old, and cousin Edwin is a bully, but one of those kind of insidious bullies, except that at a certain point he decides to attack her. He's more sexually aware than she is, and I guess she pushes back literally before things get out of hand, and consequently he falls and dies. And now, because she's being attacked, I don't think anyone could say that, you know, she deliberately set out to kill him. It was an impulsive, you know, self-preservation action. But this sets off a chain of events in Jane Steele's life that I guess it isn't fair. You know, like, murder isn't really supposed to be funny, but when the person that's being killed is just the worst, and you feel no sympathy for them, but actually feel like cheering when they're actually dead, then yeah, I think her humor is there in murder, but then I am a bit sick. I didn't mention the author. The author is Lindsay Faye, and I really enjoyed this book. It takes place primarily in London and Highgate Manor, and Jane has her childhood at Highgate, and then her mother passes away, and her father had died in France just shortly after she had been born, and so mother and daughter have traveled to Highgate Manor, where eventually Jane is expected to inherit something or other, and they have to meet up with Aunt Patience and Edwin, who are in the manor house. So this is a dynamic that's not really working very well for anyone. Everybody's at loggerheads. Jane's mother dies, and Aunt Patience is left to, you know, deal with Jane, who's not been a pleasant child to experience up at this point. So Aunt Patience sends her off to a girls' school where we encounter Mr. Munt, and Mr. Munt is one of just a different kind of bully. He's also insidious. He's got some really peculiar notions about conventional sex, and while he's not abusing the girls physically, he is exposing them to less than salubrious images and so forth. There's quite a lot of conflict in this school. There's if you've read Jane Eyre, things weren't very good for Jane in Jane Eyre's boarding school, and they are not good for Jane Steele and her classmates either. She comes across Clark, who's about 3 or 4 years younger than herself, and the thing about this boarding school is that the girls are expected to tattle on each other in order to maintain their rations. And so there's these reckonings that happen, and everybody's kind of on the lookout for other people's misdemeanors in order that they continue to get food. But it's kind of random, because every so often Mr. Munt will go, oh, well, aren't you the tattletale? You don't get your rations either. So it's this like psychotic kind of environment where good is bad and bad is good, and nobody is a friend and everybody's an enemy, but you need each other to survive. It's just a crazy school dynamic. And eventually Jane, through some actions that, I don't want to tell you the whole plot, because in a murder mystery, it's so hard to give away plot points without spoiling the best parts of a mystery. So let's just say that Clark and Jane find themselves in London, and they have a number of years there. They manage to escape the streets, and they both each have certain kinds of talents that allows them to just sustain themselves in London. And eventually they encounter something that creates a falling out. And it's heartbreaking falling out. Neither one of them really wants to be separated from each other, but circumstances are such that they just have to each go their own way. And Jane comes upon a plan that gets her back to Highgate Manor, where there is a new owner. Aunt Patience passes away, and someone quite distant in the family has inherited. And so Jane wonders, because her father was the person who owned Highgate Manor initially. Jane has been missing from the Highgate Manor circle all this time. She wonders if, in fact, Highgate Manor doesn't belong to her. So she decides to go back, and there she encounters a completely different sort of family. We encounter Charles Thornfield, who is the sort of man hero, and we have Sardar, who is his best friend, and also the uncle of the young girl Sajara. And Sardar and Sajara come from the Punjab, and also Charles Thornfield was raised there. So the two, Sardar and Charles, have been boyhood friends, and this is during the British conflict with just the politics there are just a little bit too complicated to explain. And Charles and Sardar have returned to England in order to take on this inheritance. So this is a mixed family, in the sense that we've got Charles, who's an Englishman, and Sardar and his niece, who are Punjabi and Hindu. And what are they doing in the middle of England at this time of century? Where I don't remember what year we're in. I have no idea what year we're in. So contemporaries of Jane Eyre. So they're misfits in a way, and so this house is somewhat isolated from the rest of society. Jane goes, the house is functioning in a semi-British, semi-Indian sort of a fashion. The food is completely different, and she's really enjoying herself, and her young charge that she's looking after, Sajara, is very, very, very bright, completely horse obsessed. And so her role as governess, which is how she gets in there, which is similar to Jane Eyre, is completely easeful. Everybody's having a really good time with things, but then secrets start to bubble up. How Jane got to where she is right now as a governess. What were Charles and Sardar doing in the war years? Why are these people, there are other people who are breaking and entering and trying to find a missing trunk. So the secrets are just, the tension has been building. The secrets are barely being contained. Everybody's pretty observant, so it's hard to keep secrets there. Also, Jane is still in the middle of all of this, trying to investigate what her relationship is to the inheritance. Did she inherit or didn't she inherit? Well, two things, I guess. One is that along the way, Jane, as part of her survival tactics, has had to commit a number of murders. person that I haven't spoken about is Constable Quillfeather, who is very smart, on top of the latest in investigatory techniques. And he has, turns out, by gosh, doesn't he turn out to be friends with Charles? So he's a regular at the house, and so she's got that kind of tension. The other thing that's happening as a sidebar to everything is that Jane has been reading Jane Eyre throughout her childhood and keeps referring back to it, and what would Jane do? And so we keep referencing Jane Eyre throughout the whole book. Let me see. Well, we come to the ending. It's a rip snorter of an ending. It's a true swashbuckling kind of denouement, if you like. Now, there are only two things that I didn't like about this book in terms of its structure and its plotting, and one is the pivot point around which Charles and Sardar's and Garima's mystery revolves, which doesn't have anything directly to do with Jane Steele in so much except that she's there and she's part of trying to protect Sajara. So so this big secret that these men have, I didn't fully buy into. I thought, oh, that didn't have to be such a big deal. You could have solved it this way or that way. But anyways, you know, that's what secrets are. The rest of the book is very tight, very well wound. The tension levels are great. The murders are so clever. The bad people are so bad. And the rescuing of the good people from the bad people is just... it's not clever in the sense of, oh, haven't we tricked people? It's clever in the sense of people putting their brains together and coming up with a solution that's elegant and sophisticated and almost foolproof. And it's that almost foolproof that keeps happening through the storyline that Jane is having to keep trying to close the gap on so that she doesn't get caught. And let's see. The other point that I didn't love was Charles Thornfield, as we first encountered him, is quite a strong character. And Sardar, the butler, is a good secondary character. I felt that as we reached the ending of the book, the two switched, that Sardar became much more the stronger character and Charles much less so. And there's reasons for that. They're well explained. But in terms of course, this is also a love story. So in terms of who falls in love with whom, I didn't quite believe it. I felt like at a certain point maybe the author had gone in a completely different direction and then rewrote the ending. I'm not sure about that. I haven't done any research on it, but I felt that a different ending might have been with just one tweak, might have been a little more interesting. So nonetheless, I think this is a really good book. Totally enjoyed it. This is a super duper book, and I really recommend it. I give it a 5 out of 5. And it'll take you a while to read as well. It's a good 400 some odd pages. So it's a good one if you're going to be somewhere where you want something to sit down and consider. So I hope all your reading dreams and ambitions and whatever adventures continue to come true. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.